Tuesday, September 2nd, 2008, and we are gathered at Lakewood Country Club in the members' dining room. I'm Dave Cleveland of the 2008 Memorabilia Committee, along with Vic Ermel, the chairman of the Memorabilia Committee, and we're here to reminisce and have just a nice, fun conversation with a key member of Lakewood Storage.
Thank you.
What we'd like to do is just kind of let you start off and tell us a little bit about your background, where you were born and your family and where you grew up, and maybe lead us to how you ended up coming to Lakewood Country Club.
Okay. Well, my name is Charles Lott. I was born in Wilkinsburg, town just a few miles east of Pittsburgh at the Columbia Hospital. My father had made his living. He owned a general store in a little town called Center, which was also about 20 miles east of Pittsburgh. And he sold everything from dynamite to the country mines, which there were a lot of, and farm supplies to the farmers, and everything and anything you wanted, meat, vegetables, fruit, canned goods. I mean, you name it and he had it. I really wasn't much interested in the store. He tried his hardest to get me involved, but I just didn't have a feel for it. So in my early years, while I was just started high school, I believe, Plum High School, which was in Plum Township, which is Plum Borough now. I went over to El Coma Golf Club, which was about 6 miles from where I lived, and I started to caddy. And in those days, you got 90 cents or $1 for a single, and the caddy master took a dime, so you come up with 90 cents, and the tip was usually maybe a quarter. 50 cents was a big deal. $1 was a real big deal, which didn't happen too often. But anyhow, the second year, the golf pro at the club, Dick Shoemaker, for some reason took a liking to me and asked me if I'd like to work in a pro shop. So I worked in the pro shop one season, shining clubs, and he let me work in the shop and dressed me up a little bit. All of a sudden, I felt pretty important, you know. Snotty-nosed kid, all of a sudden I was, you know. So anyhow, he would play golf in the evening, and I was supposed to be caddying for him, but he'd let me play with him. And I got to hitting the ball pretty good, and he instructed me, of course. And in fact, I passed a tip on to young Ted Smith here a month or so ago. He told me, he says, when you're in the bunker and you walk in the bumper, don't be thinking about your girlfriend. He says, fill the sand with your feet, and that'll tell you what kind of shot to play. So I told young Smith, I said, he's on that Hooter tour, you know, and I said, instead of thinking about those Hooter girls, fill the sand with your feet, and you might win some money. So anyhow, time went on, and I was in high school, and I played varsity football in high school, and Plum High School. And I went over to the club. It was just in February, I believe. There was snow on the ground, and I was supposed to meet Dick Shoemaker there to see about working in the spring. And the greenkeeper walked through the club. He said, what are you doing in here? I said, well, I'm here to see Mr. Shoemaker about my job. He says, why don't you come out and work with the men instead of those goddamn sissies? So when Mr. Shoemaker came, I said his name was Len Hazlett Sr. And he said that he thought I might like to work in a golf course. So Shoemaker says, well, you do whatever, he says, and just let me know, you know. So in the spring, I went down to maintenance building and met with Len Hazlett Sr. And he said, well, give it a try and you might like it. So instead of going back to the clubhouse and the golf shop, I went down and started to work on a golf course. And in those days, it was there was no time and a half. It was straight time, and we worked from morning till dark every day. On Saturdays, though, everybody worked in those days till noon on Saturday. Even the office guys and that, everybody worked till noon. So at noon on Saturday, we didn't have to start early or nothing. But on Sunday, everybody started early. And I just couldn't get enough of that golf course. I just loved it. So a little time went on. I got out of school and I enrolled it, although I was very familiar with Penn State because every year they had a seminar up there for a week and we'd all go up to Penn State. And I enrolled in a 2-year program, and I started out, I waited tables at the Nittany Line Inn to make some money. People could never see me as a waiter, but you do what you have to do to make a buck. So I think I was into about 16 or 18 months, and my father fell and broke his hip in a store, and he called me home to help out, which I did. And I never went back to school. That was it. In fact, I never really liked school. I always thought that I was good enough to do what I wanted to do, and I was smart enough, and I had that much a way about me that, I wasn't home but 2 weeks, and what had happened was Dick Shoemaker moved to Beachmont Country Club. And in turn, Len Hazlett Sr. moved up there as a golf course superintendent to Beachmont Country Club. So Len Hazlett Jr., who had just got out of the service, took over his job at Alcoma. So he called me and he said, hey, he says, what are you doing? And I said, well, right now I'm helping out at home. My dad broke his hip, and he said, well, how about coming over and talk to me? So I did, and he says, I need an assistant. He says, how about it? So I said, well, I'm not available right this minute, but maybe in a week or two I can, So I went over, and well, anyhow, I became his assistant. In the meantime, I had married, and I moved to apartment in next to where the wife lived in Wilkinsburg. So a few years went by, and Len Hazlett Jr. took a job at Green Oaks Country Club a few miles down the road. And it's a Jewish club. It was a Westmoreland Country Club, and Westmoreland built a new club east of out in Murraysville, in that area somewhere. They built a new country club, new club, everything. So he took on the job at Green Oaks Country Club, which he never really got along with those people. I mean, it was one thing right after another. So eventually, the job at the country club opened up here on the east side, and he interviewed for the country club job and got it. And I took over his job. I was already there at the Alcoma Golf Club. So we communicated back and forth, and in the meantime, I got a draft notice to go into the service, which really shocked me because I thought that I was, I think, 23 years old at the time. But anyhow, I went in the service, and I had basic training, went to Germany for 18 months. We guarded that east-west border at the time. That was our duty, the 7th Army.
This is the Army?
Army.
Okay.
So I got out of there, and of course, with an honorable discharge, I behaved myself. And went back to the club where I worked. They gave me my job back. I bought Bill Anderson was president of the club, and he was a home builder. He was buying up all the farms around that area, which there was a lot of, and building houses. So we became sort of friends, and I bought a new home just off of number 10 Green at Elcoma. It was a brick house, nice home. He gave it to me. I didn't have much money. He gave it to me on a land contract, and I pay so much a month. Eventually, I would, you know. So I finally started to relax a little. I had a new home. I had a job across the street. I was feeling pretty content. One evening, the phone rang. It was Jerry Sindelar. And he says, I talked to your friend at the country club. The reason he called over there, he was looking for the greenkeeper that was there before Len Hazlett took over. And Len Hazlett says, I never knew him because he was gone when I came here, a guy by the name of Andreessen, which I never knew. And he says, he told me that you may be interested in coming to Cleveland, and we're looking for a good man. I says, well, I thought to myself, oh, here we go again. So anyhow, I said, yeah, I says, I'd sort of be interested. So I came up to Cleveland here, in the old clubhouse yet. They had the old watchman, Bill was his name. He lived upstairs. They had rooms upstairs, about 4 or 5 where the help, some of the kitchen help stayed in the 3rd floor. They had rooms up there. So that was my greeting at Lakewood Country Club. It was in February, and
What year was this, Chuck?
this was 1960. And Bill opens the front door, and of course the place was closed, and he said, what do you want? That was my greeting at Lakewood Country Club. I said, well, I'm here to see the green chairman, Mr. Sindelar, and they're supposed to be here. And well, come on in. And they had like a little lounge, if you're not familiar with the old place, probably not. He said, sit right there. They had a so I sit there, and come along Mr. Sindelar, and Dr. Manco was one of the guys. Andy Hornick was one of the guys. So we had a nice chat, and I told them about myself, and they were looking for somebody to kick some ass, you know, and get things done, because what had happened here was Carl Bimbitel was a pro greenkeeper. And then they felt that was a little beyond him. You know, things started to change, and they wanted a little more work. So they made, Bud Fulver was a guy that was his assistant. They gave the job to Bud Fulver. Well, Bud Fulver, and I never met this man, he apparently had a little drinking problem. And anybody that gave him a hard time during the day, he'd come back in the evening with a little too much sauce and challenge him, I guess, and which goes over big, you know, especially at a country club. So anyhow, that's what happened, and so they said, well, we'll keep in touch with you. So I left. They called me again a couple weeks later. I came up again, and the place to me, the second time I came, I rode around. They had an old shanty for a pro shop down here. They had a shanty back here in a maintenance building in the halfway house, and the clubhouse was nothing to brag about. It was it was comfortable, but it was an old farmhouse that was added on to, and I thought to myself, gee, I don't know about this joint. But anyhow, we had another nice meeting, and they said, okay, we're talking to some other people. We'll let you know. So I left. So they called me again, 3rd time. Would you come up? We'd like to talk to you. And I thought to myself, Jesus. So here I come again. Same deal, same guys. And we chatted, and they talked about different things they wanted to do. They said, you know, Chuck, we're in the process of really wanting to upgrade this place. We're thinking about building a new clubhouse, and we're thinking about building a new maintenance building, and we're thinking about all these different things they were thinking about doing, you know. which sounded good to me. In fact, there was an old farmhouse right at the corner of the maintenance road, and they said, "That's your house. We're going to buy that, and that's where you're going to live." I said, "Oh, okay." So I left. So a couple weeks later, they called me again, maybe a week later. And same thing. And then I told them, I said, "Hey, I don't know what's with you guys, but I says, I don't come up here on my health." I said, "It's costing me money to drive up here." Of course, they weren't contributing nothing. And I says, "Either you guys make a decision or the hell with it." I said, "I'm not coming up here anymore." And old Manco, he said, "Are you a hothead?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I don't think I'm a hothead, but God damn it," I says, "be reasonable about it. You either give me the job or forget." I said, "I got a job." So they said, "Will you leave the room?" I left and sat out. I come back in and they says, "You got the job." I said, "When can you start?" I think I started here, it was February 16th or 20th of 1960. And Bill Anderson was nice enough to me, and they treated me really well. He took his house back and gave me my money back that I had put into it, which was, he didn't have to do that, but he was very nice about it and wished me luck, And my green chairman was Lou Abrams, who had a massive car distributorship in the Pittsburgh area. He owned, I don't know how many car lots, plus he had one himself, and he was a scratch player, and he was very, very good to me and wished me luck and all that kind of stuff. So anyhow, here I am. I come up here, and Lott told me, he says, "Chuck, we have 7 old guys back there that were employees." And he says, "What I'd like you to do, number one, is get rid of those old guys." He said, "I think we need younger guys in here." I said, "Well, let me take a look and see what you got, and I'll do what I have to do, to get things going here." So I went back here to the shop and introduced myself and told them what I expected of them. No drinking, blah, 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 I laid the law down. And they turned out to be the best 7 guys anybody would ever want. They were all old farmers, retired. All they needed was some direction. Even Lott told me, he says, "Chuck," he said, "I made a terrible mistake telling you to get rid of these guys." He said, "Jesus," he says, "once you come on the scene, those guys are just," he said, "they're excellent." I said, "Yeah, anybody give their right arm to have these guys." I says, they're workers, So what we did the first couple winters, the elm trees were all dying. And we must have cut down 1,000 elm trees. We were out there in the dead of winter. We had a large fire back on Hilliard Road there. We'd haul all the stuff back there and throw it on the fire. And we must have cut down 1,000 elm trees. We had a couple old Clinton chainsaws and those guys, weather didn't bother them, zero. We were out there. Of course, there was no place to go because that shop we had was only a 1-car. We left one guy in there, the mechanic, and the rest of us had to be doing something, so we were out there cutting trees down. So anyhow,